This media is brought to you by Polyscope.
In the realm of tomorrow, where techniques mind, we ponder, we dream.
All right, so thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to finally meet you because this is how we meet each other nowadays through Zoom. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
Of course. I'm David Minaj, co-founder and CEO of Valory. We are focused on building autonomous AI agents. And the future we're passionate about is one where end users can own these agents outright, where businesses can own them outright, where we don't have to rent them from some Web2 platform. So everything we do is open source and enabled by a protocol that utilizes blockchain and crypto incentives.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So why don't you can you explain for somebody who's not familiar what an autonomous AI agent would be, say, in comparison to generative AI that many people might be familiar with?
Yeah, so I think of it like talkers and doers. So models by themselves are talkers. You pose a prompt and it gives you a response based on the prompt you provided. Um, Obviously, um, as time passes, they become increasingly capable, and so the answers we get are increasingly interesting. An agent is something which then takes data and interacts with the environment, maybe takes information from the environment to pass it back to the model. So you effectively turn like a talker into a doer. So an example would be an agent that, whilst you do other things, might trade your stock portfolio on your behalf, or whilst you do other things, might research something which takes a longer time to research, or might participate in some application context which you would otherwise maybe have to participate in. So maybe it researches like your latest like travel itinerary and then books a couple of things and then also figures out how to connect with this vendor who might only be available at a time when you're asleep and things like that. So you basically outsource entire tasks to it.
So as opposed to today, where say if you were doing travel research, you would just say to your AI, I want to go to Singapore or whatever, and it could give you some responses, whereas an agent would actually go out and connect with booking services and do the booking for you on your behalf.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of actually a bigger theme of I think how technology is evolving. We're like moving from this interactive phase to one where entire outcomes can be delivered to us by these sort of autonomous systems that work for us in the background. Like a self-driving car is an example. Obviously, you get in and you give it a destination, and then you do other things whilst it takes you from A to B. Another example is a software agent that books your holiday.
Right. Now, I think that there's still some reticence on the behalf of people who hear about these things as to that where they wanted them to. I mean, I think they're okay with going, let me research my trip to Singapore on generative AI. But when it comes to actually booking something or spending money or making trades, there's a little reticence there. I mean, are you seeing that?
Yeah, 100%. And that's also why we are focused on use cases that are a bit different to begin with. So more on sort of these financial use cases where we can demonstrate that historically the agents have performed to a certain degree, and then also can use that very well structured context to improve those agents, especially once the kind of space in which the agent operates in becomes more open ended. Obviously, there's like larger uh, uh, margin for error, and so you have to kind of think about like how do you go into these application spaces. So I think actually this travel example is sort of more like a nice to have than an actual reality right now.
Right. So can you give us an example of one of the financial ones? Because I love the sound of the automatic trading, but at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, what if it makes some trades I don't like? Or maybe it knows something that I don't know and it's making this trade on my behalf, which may be good in the long run or in the medium run, but in the short run, I'm freaking out about it. Like, how do we get over that hurdle of people sort of giving up that kind of autonomy to the AI?
So actually, people have done this for a long time, right? So automated trading bots exist for a long time. So often, like indices or certain like portfolio strategies are centered around sort of autonomous automated systems in the background, sort of aggregating large amounts of information, maybe creating like some index or some sort of measurement, which then determines like the sort of portfolio strategy that gets implemented. And that's nothing new. And so all you're doing here is sort of shifting more towards like open-ended, like more autonomous sort of behavior. And what we concretely offer are these sort of agents or create are these agents that do that in a crypto context. So what's interesting there is that obviously it's very composable, very open. So you can leverage these primitives and then build these sort of agents on top that take like signals from various places to enact on these primitives and basically create like portfolio strategies with them. So it's not like it's a continuum where you're going from sort of more like automation, what we had for a long time now, to sort of more autonomous agents. And as a result, users can also sort of build like confidence, I guess, in the product.
Right, because you're absolutely right. I mean, there's programmatic trading has been going on forever, but it's usually not in the hands of individuals, right?
Exactly, yeah. And so that's also a part where you're just taking something which might be more like accessible to like a professional to commoditize it more.
Right. So what's the big difference between, say, that kind of programmatic trading to what's happening today with the kind of agents that you're able to release to regular consumers?
Yeah, so obviously what's interesting here is that you can increasingly use the generative AI aspect to make those systems more dynamic. So you on the end user experience side, you can let users express portfolio strategies in a way in which they can actually express them. So what do I mean by this is like if you think about like a lot of products, when they're sort of UI based, you have this kind of challenge of like you need to kind of focus it on a specific persona it speaks to, like someone with enough context on understanding
Oh,
that sort of
especially in the
financial
financial
product.
space, some of these
Exactly.
things are ridiculously complicated. I mean, you get a beginner on there and they're like, what am I supposed to be looking at? These
Exactly,
charts?
exactly. And so a beginner, if you have more like a chat interface, where you kind of instruct your agent to do something, you can be as simple as, okay, well, I'm going to give you here like $1,000. Now sort of trade that in what I would consider safe assets, and you can describe it in the way you want, or maybe you describe it in a very different way. And some more advanced user might be very specific on saying, okay, I want to go after these asset classes, like these kind of tokens or these kind of like mimetic things, which are sort of currently like hyped, or you can be as expressive or as coarse as you want.
Cool. Can you actually have it follow other people's trades too? Like I want to trade like Nancy Pelosi or something like that. Is that possible?
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, so for context, what we're creating on the Valory side is like the sort of base implementation, and they're all open source. And so people can obviously take those off the shelf, and they have a certain set of capabilities. And then what we're seeing is that also the more advanced users, the developers come in and sort of extend them to give them more capabilities. So there's like yeah, a bit of a mix and match depending on like what your capabilities are and how you want to go about it.
Yeah, no, I love this, and I've said for a long time that we really do need sort of a personal AI agents because we're poor human beings fighting against this regime of big iron and all these big brains trying to figure out how to sell us more stuff. We need an AI on our side to be able to fight against them at the same time. So is this like what was the genesis of this idea? Where did this idea come from?
Well, it comes from a couple of angles, but one is like around like privacy and personal data and this idea that you have control over like the AI you're using. Um,
Right.
so some data I just might not want to share with someone because I just might not want to. And then there's another angle around like, okay, well, AI as a whole, like as it increasingly impacts our life, there's this idea of alignment, right? Like aligning these AIs with like a set of goals. But the problem is humans aren't aligned amongst each other. So
Hmm.
if you assume that there's some sort of aligned model, what does this even mean? Like aligned to what, right? Like so the idea then is also to say, okay, well, maybe it's better all of us have like AI systems that are aligned to us individually, and then we have a sort of societies of AI, right? And that
Right.
seems like sort of more natural to how we think about like society at large. And then like there's another angle we take at this. I'm an economist by training, which is like just thinking about like competition more generally and like how like marketplaces evolve and societies evolve. And it's very important that you have like dynamism, that you have competition. And it seems pretty unhealthy if we all end up, let's, push this to the extreme, all sort of rent a little bit of agent and model space from OpenAI,
Yeah,
and
that's
all
exactly where we're
economic
at right
activity.
now.
Exactly.
Right.
And all economic activity flows over that. Like that seems terrible. And so yeah, there's also this like so active thing of saying, okay, what can we do to push away from the centralizing force to create like agents and models that live really with the user and are tuned to the user. And that can sometimes even be like a business, right? Or a group of people.
So do these models they still exist on your system though, right? I mean, if I was a beginner user and I don't really know anything about it, I wanted to create an AI, say a travel agent AI for me to help me book my flights, etc. I would still have to sort of subscribe to your service and just configure it. I mean, it would run, but it would still run on my behalf, but it would be stored and all the data would be located with you.
Great question. So the way we've architected everything is as a multi-agent system, because ultimately, if you want to offer capabilities that are similar to something more centralized, you can obviously not like ship it all to the end user and have them run it on their like very constrained local device.
Well,
So
ideally,
the way
ideally, that's what you'd want, but we're not there
ideally,
yet.
that's what you'd want. We're not there yet. Hopefully we'll get there. But even once I think once we get there in terms of like certain models being like sufficiently distilled or like sufficiently small that they're like able to run on what then as a consumer device, we still have this issue that ultimately, agents and models tend to do well in like certain contexts, and so like multi-agent system is sort of the design principle we have in the background, where your local agent actually relies on other agents
Mm.
in the marketplace to get stuff done. So all the use cases I mentioned before, actually the agents which you locally run, which are yours and where you have access to the code and everything, they trade with other agents that are sort of invisible to you in the background to get stuff done, loosely speaking. And that's where sort of the crypto rails is very interesting, because it really like facilitates that very easily. You can, as an end user, download the software client, spin up your agent, fund it with some crypto, and then that agent, as a result, is able to kind of leverage these other agents by doing like these kind of micro payments amongst each other for information or other kind of services.
Well, interesting. I guess it has to go like that because if you think about it, I mean, the agent that's working on your behalf doesn't know everything, but
Exactly.
it's almost or it's like a conductor. It orchestrates other agents to go off and do other things.
And that there's also very interesting composability that is enabled. So one aspect of autonomy is like around like the amount of tools and capabilities you have access to. And as you know, naturally, if I have a system like somewhere, it's sort of confined to whatever that system offers. But if I have like a multi-agent system where these systems connect, then my system can actually increase its autonomy and like its capabilities as like sort of the society of agents around it grows. It's like similar to humans, right? Like we don't
Hmm.
do everything ourselves. We then enable to procure services from others and outsource things and so on.
But you could conceivably have an agent that does it that knows how to do everything once it does it once,
Yeah,
conceivably.
we'll see. Yeah, conceivably, yes. And then the trade-off is again like where does it run, right? Do you manage to kind of give such an agent to everyone, or does that end up being hugely centralizing?
Right, right. So one of the things that I like about you is that you are pushing the agent to the end user, and it's an agent that's really on behalf of the end user. But at some point, did you ever see yourselves as being, say, bought up by a big tech company and just like lose that autonomy, or are you going to stick it out?
I think we are structurally set up in a way where there's a high chance that that doesn't happen. So firstly, there's this um, sort of set of open source tools which are sort of accordingly licensed. Obviously, they need continued input from developers and improvements, and that's where we have a number of like decentralized institutions that are sort of we have Valory, the labs, we have like a foundation that's independent of it, and other labs contributing. So that's, I think, one of the benefits when like crypto protocols and crypto incentives are done right, that you can actually like create sort of a network effect around like a crypto protocol where different stakeholders are sort of coordinated, rather than having to keep it all within like the closed walls of some business.
Mhm.
But
So
I
it
mean,
is.
future,
Go ahead.
yeah. Obviously, that's how we set it up, and that's how it's currently operating. And I hope that's what will sustain. We'll see where we land.
So these what how, can these agents, how do they learn from us? It's like in the example, I mean, we were talking about an example before where I wrote a story about sometime in the future where we have an agent that sort of sits on our shoulder, knows everything about us, and can interact with other sales agents. How do we, what do we need to do to get to the point where this AI agent does know everything about me and can act on my behalf, basically making decisions on my behalf by knowing enough about me to know what kind of decision this is going to make or I should be making?
Yeah, so we don't do all this ourselves. There's also some partners in the network who are more like focused on that aspect. So I would say like currently most of our agents learning actually comes from their interactions with each other and with the sort of protocols and the data sources they interact with, because most of our use cases currently don't involve the sort of personal and private information yet.
Hmm.
But yeah, there's you know, clearly applications there, and interestingly also like new kind of technologies, right, where you can do sort of federated learning. You can even do like kind of multi-party computation where some of the kind of uh, privacy properties are retained around like what data you share into that process and so on. We hope to get there, but currently we're not like kind of leveraging that fully.
So we're not at the point now where I can just point it at my Facebook and my Twitter and my all my other streams and go, develop a persona of what you think I might like, and then come back to me
Well,
with what you want. So we're not quite there yet.
well, yeah, I mean, we haven't gotten an application like this right now. I think what what we are seeing is that there's now these sort of agents that are more like used as sort of influencers, and sometimes yeah, they're trained on like some sort of public body of knowledge around the persona. Like in our context, that already happens a little bit as well. But I think it's more kind of private data and you know, let's say giving your agent access to your entire like file system and having it study it, or like yeah, your private information on some sort of um, social media platform or something. It's just like something we're feeling a bit less comfortable doing so early, because there's all these like implications around ensuring that the data actually you know stays private, and that's
Right.
it technically has a couple of hurdles, but like it's certainly something where, for instance, some of our partners are working on more in a targeted fashion.
Hmm. So you were saying that is the main thrust of what you're doing today is in the finance crypto space, or do you have other areas that you're spearheading into?
Finance, yeah, crypto space, if you want to put it that way, and then there's also these kind of like influencer kind of social media agents, for lack of a better word, where you kind of imbue them with like a personality, and that personality might actually even develop as these agents interact with other agents. That's actually a current use case which is taking off a lot.
Oh wow, you're doing that today? So I can create an AI agent and have it go off and do things?
Yes, we have two like so the protocol, I haven't even mentioned the name yet. It's called OLAS, and we have two kind of modes for people to use agents on it. One is a very end user friendly one by an app called Pearl. You can find it on olas.network. There's a banner on the top. And then there's some more like heavy approach, which requires you still to run these agents via the terminal. So the last mentioned one is still on this like heavier approach, but we're aiming to bring it into Pearl in the coming weeks.
Very cool. So I can just create an AI influencer and have it automatically post to socials for me through your system?
Yeah, you give it a persona, and then it will post on social media and also kind of evolve its role as it interacts with like its audience.
Oh, very cool. And how many of these do you have out there right now? I'm curious.
Of this one is around 10 or so. This is not the large. It's a very recent use case. I think the largest use case we have where there's hundreds of agents is on the financial side with
Right.
prediction markets and with like just portfolio management basically.
So when you started the company, where did you think it was going to go? I mean, did you look at universal agents in the end, or were there specific verticals that you definitely wanted to target, and you're targeting those today?
I'm working in agents since over 5 years. So initially, they came from the angle of sort of multi-agent systems at this. There wasn't large language models like widely used back at that time.
Right.
And so it really changed how we build agents and where the use cases were. Initially, it was very focused on sort of utilizing these kind of crypto interactions to facilitate like these more financial use cases. Now with the large language models since 1.5 years or so, we're really seeing that like the applications change a lot, and obviously now it's a very hot topic for agents of all sorts and all sorts of domains, and I'm very sure that will stay with us. So yeah, it's changed dramatically over time.
Interesting. So what's happening with the AI influencers? Are they actually being used? Are people going to them and going, yeah, this is great? Or is there been some kind of pushback against AI? Because I've been hearing lately that there's some kind of pushback against AI and social.
Yeah, I'm sure. I've seen that as well, and I mean it's also it's one of the trickier use cases because it is very fun if you like, I have one and it's kind of fun to see them evolve. But there's so agents more generally, right? Like there's different types. There's more sort of constrained ones that maintain their goals very well, and then this one is very sort of open-ended. So it can really sort of, depending on the interactions with others, it can evolve its persona in a way you might not even like, or in a very
Right.
annoying way where it becomes very spammy. So it's a very experimental thing. I mean, I wouldn't consider this as a sort of product with a lot of staying power at the moment, but I think what we're saying there is that these products are obviously evolving. So, some other protocols are now giving them like Twitch accounts, and then they have maybe like an embodied persona in the sense of like either even a robot in the real world, or they might actually have like just some streaming like persona which dances on some YouTube channel or whatever. And like, I mean, these are interesting, I think, early experimentations of these kind of agents, but you can see that this could get very interesting once we come back to like the private information you talked about earlier. If I can have an agent that on my behalf sort of goes out to certain events and represents me, or like, I might have like these other personas like people do have, right? Anons, where they kind of give them different personas to just explore their individuality and their personality. So I think there's naturally always this trade-off, right? Even humans can be super annoying on social media, so for sure agents can be.
Almost more than AI.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So how far away would you say? So it's time to think like a future. It's this year 2034. In 10 years from now, do you think, considering how quickly things are going, would I be able to create an AI agent which would act on my behalf in all things? Or is that just too far to imagine?
I mean, there's the technical and then there's the social and acceptance side, right? I think on the
Right.
technical side, things are moving pretty fast, and like you can have these sort of scaling laws around models, and then you can have like, the technological advances around the agent architectures on top and so on. So I think things will move very fast there. But on the social acceptance side, I mean, there's entire industries where you could immediately think like, okay, let's just drop in a lot of agents. And there's medical where sometimes you can see these papers on like AI doing better than humans in certain contexts, right? But like,
Yeah.
is there acceptance for this, right? And then
Mm.
like, therefore, what will be the adoption roadmap? So I think I'm like would say on the technical side, it'll move probably faster than we would even expect, but on the adoption side, probably a bit slower, and that will be very different across very different industries. And that's why I think like a lot of these use cases that will take off now a lot might be in a non-obvious context. So like we
Mm.
mentioned this travel example earlier, it's actually the trope example everyone gives about agents since I've been in agents.
Well,
I'm not,
because travel is terrible.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It used to be
But
great. See, this is the thing. I love travel. I used to love it when I had travel agent because the travel agent would know everything. I would have to call him up and this is what I'm looking for. Boom, you know, a little bit later, they would have the perfect trip. And then now it's all the way the other side where we have to do all the work and there's no travel agent. So
Yeah,
I want to find out some middle ground where at least there's an AI agent or something
right, right.
that can help us there. So it's a real pain point. I think it's a real pain point.
It is, but I also, just to caution, I think there's also this thing, now we know all the options that we could have, which previously we didn't, right?
Yeah.
So previously your travel agent gave you something which you perceived as good, but you just didn't know that 10 kilometers further there was an even better thing. And now you definitely know
Exactly.
because you see it on Google Maps.
I never
So
thought of that. You're
I
absolutely right.
yeah. So I think there's like this example. I'm more actually I think a lot of these agentic use cases will happen out of sight. Like there will be these like agents that directly do things on my behalf in like domains I'm already active in. But I
Mm.
think there'll be a lot of things like just entirely new industries. Like if you think about this influencer stuff with agents, like you could imagine that there's entire societies of agents influencing each other and like
Oh, it's happening
effectively
today. It's happening
exactly
today.
creating value sort of almost like in isolation from a bunch of humans, right? And then some humans who are interfacing with them sort of derive value from that. So I think economies like this, which are out of the view of humans, we'll see more of them. And then there will be the natural, like generally speaking, right, augmentation and then full autonomy. And like augmentation, there's these interesting use cases, and then full autonomy is where I'm very bullish on, where you just give away entire like jobs to the agents.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to. How far away are we from an agent basically shadowing us and then eventually going to the point, okay, I got it now. I know exactly. I kind of know what you're gonna say and do in whatever situations, and then set it off as almost like a digital twin to do things on our behalf.
People are doing this now.
Really? Okay.
To the extent that that will be sort of production. I think a lot of this again is like the interesting things here are actually at the crypto AI intersection, because there's like this, like naturally with agent as it was with crypto, there's this regulatory arbitrage. There's some things which you couldn't think of like your agent actually being allowed to do in like a
Mm,
sort of proper like legal well-defined context somewhere. But then once you move that agent into some sort of virtual world, it can actually do it there for now, right? And so I think what we'll see is more of these sort of use cases at this intersection of social and like virtual, where these agents, where you'll have your persona agent do something over there, but it wouldn't necessarily be able you wouldn't necessarily be able to use it a lot in the quote unquote real world, because you would
mm.
run into all sorts of like legal and technical barriers and acceptance barriers, right? Like, do you want to have a chat with my agent representation on the podcast? Would that be considered okay, even if you knew that it's kind of past some sort of criteria? I don't know,
Right.
right? There'll be some questions around acceptance there.
Yeah.
But then we probably would be totally fine and would love it if we both sent our agents to have a podcast, right?
That's right, because
And so
they could
like
do their own podcast, and then we could have
exactly.
a audience full of AI listening.
Exactly. And then the other thing I think is one example I like to think of is like around human connection. I do think these kind of agents which know us pretty well. I mean, this isn't so hard to do, I think, as an MVP, where they then go off and chat with each other. So imagine a world where everyone has like one of such agents, and now these agents chat, and they have all like basically 8 billion conversations with each other, which is feasible because they're software, and they can be parallelized and whatnot. And so they kind of basically go and do that, and then they come back to you and they say, well, there's this group of humans all over the world, and you should actually go talk to them because they actually connect with you on this and
Yeah.
that and this level. I think
Yeah.
that's very fascinating.
Yeah. No, we should do that. How far away are we from that? I mean, is that doable today?
I mean, I think it's actually technically doable. I think the question is more like, what's the product strategy to get these like consumer accepted kind of implementations, and then actually have that sort of be adopted at scale, right? So that it
Nice.
works. But
Nice. I also want somebody to go attend meetings for me. How far away are we from that?
well, see, this is the thing again. I think it's more about acceptance rather than,
Right.
because if the others are humans, I don't think they want an agent popping up.
No, probably not. But if everyone had their own agents popping up, then it'd be fine, right?
Exactly.
It's
Then
like
again,
I'll
and so
send
then
my
it's like
agents to a meeting.
suddenly you have a lot of commitments because of all your agents, which is another interesting
Yeah.
question, right? Like,
Yeah.
so if this agent is like an entity, like, is it, well, you might have trained it to be like you, but clearly it's not you. Like, you're like legally considered to be this like human out of flesh, and then there's this other software thing, and now this starts making various commitments, right? Like,
That's right.
binding commitments. Like, what are we gonna do now? Like, suddenly you're in like a very interesting context. And in crypto, that's again very easy, because you can imagine you give this thing a wallet, and the basic commitments it can make are scoped to that wallet. So if
Yeah,
if the
within
funds run
those
out,
boundaries. Yeah.
exactly, if the funds run out, it's done. If it makes more money, great for you. But if you imagine like the sort of more contractual commitments around it, signing like a DocuSign on your behalf on something, right? That wouldn't even be legal right now. But like,
It's
you
like,
can
would
imagine how
my
very quickly.
human sign this contract? Probably. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting times ahead for sure.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much. So, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
I'm on Twitter, David_ENIM. And then yeah, the site I mentioned earlier, olas.network, and the company Valory.xyz.
Excellent. Well, I'll put all the links in the show notes so people can go direct. Thank you so much. Great talking with you.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Pixels and philosophies merge and mold, a future untold, unseen.